I'm Jez Benton, and this is Route to the Top. I'll be meeting with a whole range of leaders who'll climb a mountain together and do a video podcast from the summit. In this episode, I've traveled to Napa Valley in California, and I'm with Jon Ruel. He's the CEO of Trefethen Wineries and has been running it for the past...
Been CEO since 2015.
2015.
Yeah, so 7 years in that role. Been with the company since 2004.
2004.
So it's been a while.
Nice. So when I first reached out to Jon, I said sort of, what's the story? And he said, well, we've got earthquakes, we've got pandemic, we've got fires, we've got all sorts of leadership challenges that we could talk about. So it was literally that text that you sent me. And I was like, right, we're done. I'm coming.
All right.
Let's go.
Right.
And also the opportunity to drink some free wine as well,
Yeah,
which
right.
I thought was going to be great.
Yeah.
So thank you for volunteering.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for coming here to Napa. It's a beautiful day. We had a little bit of rain in the morning and a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, we lucked out for sure.
We did.
If it rains, we'll just hunker on down
We want the rain.
and talk through it. Yeah, well, we'll get onto that in a minute. So when I was doing a bit of research on you, there was one line that struck me. So I wrote it down, and it said, "My passion lives at the intersection of people, plants, and the planet." Mm-hmm. So my business is all about people and leadership and culture. So we're gonna get onto that in a bit, and that's what a lot of my viewers are here to hear about and to think about. But I'm gonna start with plants. So this podcast called Route to the Top. So it's about not just our route to the top of this hill that overlooks the valley, but your route to the top of the organization that you now run. So it clearly started around plants before you got into wine, and we're an ecologist. So can you give us that story from plants to being sat here?
Absolutely. And as I'm thinking about that, it's almost like my own path took the same path as the evolution of the plant kingdom. Meaning my first plants, the first ones I studied, were unicellular algae, phytoplankton, living in the ocean. Yep. And I was doing that in Southern California as a high school student. I was always enjoying being outside in nature, but why plants in particular? Plants to me are just amazing. One easy way to put it is, if you think about it, everything in this world in terms of the energy we use comes from the sun. Everything is solar powered. Even the fossil fuels are really just decayed organic matter that started, we call plants primary producers. They're the first ones to take the energy from the sun, CO2 from the atmosphere, and capture it in the form of sugar. That's what animals eat, that's what decays and becomes fossil fuels, that's what literally energizes the rest of the world. The other thing that's really interesting about plants is that most plants can't move. And I say most because some plants are moving around in the water, but certainly terrestrial plants, once a seed falls and it germinates, they're stuck. That's why I call plants our natural chemical factories. So when we think about the metabolism of plants, there's what we call primary metabolism, which is, as I said, photosynthesis, catching energy from the sun and storing it in the form of carbohydrates. There's this whole other layer, secondary metabolism, all these really cool chemicals that plants make. And the reason plants make so many more things that ended up, say, as medicines for humans, and so many other interesting things, is because they can't move, right? So as animals evolved, they added fur, they learned to build shelter, they learned to seek to migrate, right? Plants can't migrate. Right. Animals can literally change the climate they're in. Plants have to deal with the climate they're in. And so plants have evolved things like natural sunscreens. We think about antioxidants in plants, including, not to fast forward, but including grapes and wine, right? One of the reasons red wine is good for you is because the antioxidants that the grapes have, it's not by accident. Plants evolved to have these to protect themselves from oxidative damage like sunburn. Yeah. So plants have always interested me, and I could talk more about how I went from plankton to wine, because it was quite a journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and I because that's the other thing that fascinates me is from the science of wine and the work that you do here, and on the walk up, I was thinking to myself, your ability to zoom in. I mean, we stopped on the drive, and you were like, okay, this is this, and this does that, and we planted this, and then we do that, and like your knowledge at a very granular level, to be able to what I would call zoom in, right down to the grape and the vine that we walk past, to zoom all the way out to be thinking about the macro effects of your organization on climate change, or how you manage and deal with the threats of climate change. Right? That zoom in to zoom out is massive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So let's just talk to me about that. Your ability. I mean, obviously you started as a viniculturist here, and became the CEO, but they're two very different jobs.
They are, yeah. And I'm constantly zooming in and zooming out. I think it's a great analogy to running, the needs of running a company. Go where you need it, dig in, figure out what's going on, put the systems in place, and then back yourself out so that you're safe, ready to go into that next area of concern within the company. Speaking of, our vineyard and winery really as an ecosystem, the devil is in the details. When we think about something like sustainability, it's easy to say we want to be greener or we want to farm with a lighter touch. But what happens when the insect population blows up on you? If you don't understand the biology behind the insects, if you don't understand how to create a cultural system within your vineyard that protects you against them, you're not going to find out about it until you already have a plague. And once you have a plague, then you're busting out the chemicals and you're spraying everything, and that's not sustainable. And so we start by learning. We start by engaging with the plants and animals, the humans, everyone in our environment, and understanding how can we work together, how can we support each other, all the species in our vineyard, to develop resiliency. And so then I hear, what are the unfortunate consequences of global trade and travel, which has only increased throughout human civilization, is the global trade of pests, right? Invasive pests. Yeah. And here in California, the value of our agriculture in California is about half of the nation's agricultural value. This is a lot of agricultural value here, a lot of risk put in this basket of California, and a lot of people, a lot of planes, a lot of ships coming and going. On average, every 2 or 3 years, we get what could be a new pest of grapes. We've had a moth from Australia. We now had another moth from Europe. We had a vine mealybug from Northern Africa. These pests are coming from all over. But when I hear something like a moth, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm concerned, but I don't need to kill every last moth. And I feel a little better because we have bats. So we were proactive. We have bat boxes on the property. We have Mexican free-tailed bats that are just looking for a place to live. They move into these little boxes, 250 of them in one colony. They're out there flying every night. And so before the moth even got there, we built bats into our ecosystem. So then the moth shows up and sounds like bat food. And so really, biodiversity is just one example. But to get there, we have to understand the biology. And what I realized when I first got here is that I couldn't do it all myself. So I was studying, in the past, research science and a lot about plants and their relation to their environment. And when I got here, I realized the importance of humans in the ecosystems, in all the ecosystems, but specifically in agriculture and in grape growing. And so I worked closely with our vineyard team to help them understand why we pull leaves around the clusters to affect the light environment, to decrease the disease pressure. And as soon as we increased that understanding, the quality of the work, the engagement of the work went up, and everybody's thriving. The people, the grapes, and the wines. You can taste it in the bottle.
Yeah. So that's your... I'm going to come back to your touch on sort of people and the culture here, but you have choice. You've made many choices over the years of building and growing this business, and with the family. Right? It's a family-owned business.
Absolutely.
So how do you and the family work together to make the right choices, or what you feel are the right choices? Because I've just sort of dipped my toe into knowledge around regenerative farming, for example, and I hear some of the things like, well, why did you make that choice in the first place? Like, that destroyed the soil in the farms in the middle of the country. Like, so you guys seem to be very purposeful about the decisions and the choices that you make. So how does that actually work in practice? How do you come together to make some of those decisions?
No, that's a great example of a great question. I think particularly the pandemic in recent memory, what I've been saying to my employees is recognize that we're values-driven and people-centric. And our ability to be those two things, values-driven, and we have 6 specific company values, and being people-centric, I think is in part because of our private ownership. So I work really closely with the Trefethen family, and their values and mine really resonate, and as they do with our entire family of employees. And it's really special to work for a family that is rooted here in the Napa Valley. They live here, they're part of the community, and they take a really long-term view of the business. So again, going back to sustainability, that's hard to do if you're constantly focused on quarterly profits. If you're focused on a multi-generational family business, sustainability is critical to your future. And so it's really the resonance of our values and their long-term commitment, plus plus the work they put into it. You know, I didn't start the company, I run the company.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed growing the company and running the company, but they built it. And Jon and Janet really built the winery starting in the early 70s. 1973 was our first vintage. And they did amazing work to make a name.
It was the year of my birth.
Mine too.
Oh, nice. we need to crack a bottle of 1973.
I bought a wine,
something.
but it's not a 73. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so they built a name for the winery and helped build a name for Napa at a time when there weren't that many wineries in Napa.
Right.
And so I feel fortunate to come into a company that had some brand equity, that had a great culture, and just take it from there with knowing that, you know, we have real resonance in our values.
Yeah. But they've changed as well. Like
Absolutely.
it's not the same as it was in 1973.
We're always changing.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Having walked around and seen, you know, electric tractor parked up and charging through to staff vegetable, huge, massive acreage of staff vegetable gardens, which could all be grapes if you wanted it to be. And just the things that you do and the way in which you've evolved that over
We've
the
had
years.
to change a lot to stay the same, meaning to stay the same, we've kept our footprint. We've never bought another vineyard, and we don't want to. We don't want to also be known for Pinot Noir from the Russian River or Malbec from Argentina or build an empire. We want to focus on our vineyard and just keep honing our craft, honing the culture of our company, supporting the growth of our team members, and just doing everything better and better. Like the vegetable project that you mentioned, it's been going on since 2008, but every year it's something different. It's what varieties of tomatoes do the employees like this year, and what do we need in our culinary programs for the guests when they come, so we can do some really interesting food pairings. We actually, you know, as an example, the chef found a wild strain of arugula. So now we've got our own house strain of arugula that we're growing in the garden, and it's got this nice peppery note, which really goes really nice with our Cabernet. That's just an example of one of our recent discoveries right on our property.
Yeah, really interesting. So you mentioned 6 values. What are they?
All right. Good
Now here's a test.
Yeah,
Can you remember all
exactly.
6?
I'll start with sustainability, because that's what I've already mentioned, and we can talk more about the details of that, but it's really core to our mission. Another one is family. It's not just a reference to the Trefethen family, but it's treating our employees and our customers like family. We have a tasting room. We welcome guests every day. We also sell wine around the country and around the world, and we have for decades. So our partners in the trade, our restaurateurs, our consumers who pick up wine at a wine shop, they're all part of our family, and we want to make sure they feel that. Another is respect. We make wine with respect. Respect for the environment around us, respect for the variety. We want Cabernet to taste like Cabernet, not like generic overripe red wine, not to name other wineries. So that's one. So I said family, sustainability, respect. Authenticity is another one. We encourage our employees to be their authentic selves at work, and we want authenticity in our process, right? These days, one of the common questions I get is, come on, the Napa industry was built on baby boomers. They're getting old. They're going to stop drinking. You're not going to attract young people. And I'm like, really? Let's read about what young people. Well, young people, one, they're diverse. They're not all the same. But the degree to which we could make some generalizations about, say, millennials and their interest in authenticity, right? It was literally 10 years ago, a teenager on Facebook who called out Gatorade for putting flame retardant in their drinks. And they're like, shoot, you got a petition, and they stopped, right?
Yeah.
Like, millennials care where their stuff's come from. Care where their stuff comes from. Great, come see, because look, it comes from the grapes. We grow it right here. We're doing everything from the soil to the table right here with a real authentic process. So let's see, I said family. I said, are you counting?
Yeah,
family?
4.
All right, 4.
Sustainability,
I got
family,
2 more.
respect, authenticity.
I got
but
2
on
more.
the authenticity one, I'll give you a break for a second. When I arrived, we had a look around the winery and went up to the tasting room, etc. And I walk into a lot of organizations all the time, right? Could be brand new organization that I've never heard of and I'm walking into for the first time, through to another one that I've worked with for many, many years. And we pick up on those cultural cues.
Oh,
and most buildings, when you
Yeah.
walk in, have a big poster up that says, we value this, that, and the other, right? And I always read that and go, no, I wonder what this is going to feel like as I come into the building, you know? Because then they say, integrity or teamwork, or whatever.
Those are words.
And you experience something different, or you do experience the same. So my experience of walking in was 3 people behind the front desk who A, they were young, and B, they were very friendly and chatted and can I help with this? And then when we walked up into the winery, I would say, and I didn't do a poll, but I would say broad spectrum of age ranges.
Absolutely.
From young folks that come out for the weekend.
Answer, exactly. Take a step in our tasting room. It's people from everywhere.
You can
it's
see
all kinds of people.
Yeah. And a diverse group from
Yeah.
ages and ethnicities and everything in that room. You could just see it. It wasn't old, it wasn't young. It was just a really
a bit
nice,
of everything.
diverse group.
I love
of
that.
people.
I love that about wine. Wine can bring people together. And we make a range of wines because not everyone likes the same wine. So we make a number of different varieties, and we try to make, our hosts in there are called wine educators, which is an easy segue to our next value, which is learning.
Right.
Their job is to teach, to educate. When people come to Napa, they might have saved up for years. This one time they're going to come to Napa, that place where wine comes from. That's our chance to really educate them about the history of Napa, about the work, the craftsmanship that goes into wine, and to create an emotional connection with our brand. But honestly, the education that we do goes deeper. I had the good fortune of sitting with Karen Ross, who's the Secretary of Agriculture for California. I sat down to dinner with her and a number of other people in Sacramento some years ago. And she said, John, you have a responsibility. And I was like, oh, what's that? She said, well, name another kind of farm that people are going to fly from around the country, around the world to go visit, right? Yeah. Oh, I love this tomato. Yeah. I'm going to Italy to see where it came from.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. So certainly not in the kind of numbers that
not these kind of numbers, no. And she said, so when people are coming, can you teach them about agriculture, not just wine? And I was like, absolutely. We are an estate winery, so we grow all of our grapes. And it's a great reminder, it's very humbling, it's a great reminder that wine is an agricultural product. And farming each year is challenging and increasingly challenging. New regulations and climate change and new pests, it's tough. But we like it. We like the adventure of it. And so, we have a real opportunity to educate our guests when they come, but also we take that learning value internally. And we have a program called Trefethen University, which we started a number of years ago. And it's one of the many things that Haley Trefethen is very involved in within the company. And this is a program where we're educating across department. So we'll get our tasting room team, spend a morning in a vineyard with a vineyard team, and they're pruning grapevines in the winter. And they're like, oh, it's cold out here. And wow, how do you know where to cut it? And they're thinking, wow, all of this goes into that. We'll bring the vineyard team up into the tasting room and run them through a consumer tasting. And they're like, wow, that's how you do this. And so it's a great way to really build engagement across different parts of the company. And everyone just feels more informed in their roles. And
they
more
can connect the dots. What I do here affects what happens over there.
Exactly.
It
matters.
Affects what happens
I've said it before, but we're so vertically integrated. Like literally we start with soil and we end up with wine in a bottle. And every part of that process is done by a different man or woman on our team. It's pretty amazing, to do it all ourselves. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to learning again in a second.
All right.
But so would you describe yourself as a farmer?
Absolutely.
A CEO?
Yes.
And an environmentalist?
Yes.
And what else?
A husband, a father, a brother, a son, and an advocate for growth of people, and really the supporting the health of our planet. There's an identity statement I built for myself, which is part of how I sort of drive my everyday behavior. And it is just that I'm a loving husband, father, brother, and son, and I'll work daily with my heart and my intellect to support the growth of others and the health of our planet.
Yeah.
And when I think about my move from ecology in the research sense, it was in part because I wasn't checking all those boxes. I was missing the satisfaction of really helping other people grow and the connection of making something really tangible in that effort.
Yeah.
And these days, it's I love this industry. It's really amazing.
Well, and that's the intersection that you talked about around plants, people, and planet. That what you talked about.
It's where my passion is. You're on it.
Yeah.
And I think it really is. I haven't forgotten my ecology. I'm putting it into practice, right? It is so exciting to have the scientific understanding and then to be able to use it to achieve a really tangible goal, not just the wine in the bottle, but the fish in the stream. We did an in-depth restoration of a creek that runs along our property, not because it affects the flavor in the wine, but because it's the right thing to do. It's for salmonoid fishes that come from the ocean. They want to swim up the river to spawn. We want to reduce the erosion that goes into there. So we dramatically changed the landscape around it to basically bring nature back into the creek and make it more natural and better for fish. That was so much fun, and it just felt like the right thing to do. Yeah.
So you used the word passion a moment ago, and
there is one more value we didn't get to, by the way.
Okay.
Don't forget.
Hit it, and then I'll come back to the passion.
I will, just because it's a fun one.
Yeah.
And it's one that actually came to me, really resonated with me during the pandemic, because my brother happens to be a doctor. And my brother not only is a doctor, but he's in infectious disease. And when the pandemic first started, he's one of the people I talked to. And I said, oh shit, he's going to be busy, and he's going to be busy saving lives. And what am I doing? I'm over here making wine? Shoot, I wonder if I could be doing something more important. And it didn't take long in that early pandemic to realize what we're doing is really important. And the last value I haven't mentioned, joy. We do this because it brings joy. It brings joy to us when we create this, and it brings joy to people who try our wines. What we were doing is giving a reason for people to get healthy from COVID, giving them a reason to want to get home or to get back out into restaurants. We're part of enjoying life. And to see that we were smiling our way through the pandemic, we were. You know, we have had, our culture has not only persevered, it's thrived during times of challenge. It really brings us together. And again, that joy, that laughter that you hear around the property, it could be at 2 a.m. when we're in the vineyard picking grapes. It could be in a busy day in the tasting room. Either spot or in between, you're going to hear laughter. You're going to hear happiness, and that we're putting joy in the bottle, and our guests are taking it out every time they open it. And I love to go work the market. You know, I do sales trips, and it's just so fun to see around the country and around the world where our bottles end up. Usually people are having a great time, and it leads to some very engaging conversation.
It's great to hear you say that you get involved in the business and clients and sales. I posted something a few months back about, I think it was kind of, what kind of CEO are you? And looking at those that continue to be embedded with clients and the client experience and sales and stuff, you know, because that's really important. Often CEOs kind of get removed from that, and it becomes very administrative or, you know, internal people challenges and things like that, and you actually forget that you have clients. And
you visited our tasting room.
Oh, yeah.
Our customers are right there. It's a focus group that shows up every day.
Yeah.
I could be like, how did you hear about us? How do you like the Cabernet?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go right to the customer with a short walk from my office. It's really, it's great. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to the passion thing, just because it's a hot topic in my industry.
Yeah.
Lots of studies out there at the moment about people who have what we call harmonious passion.
Interesting.
Have higher levels or better levels of well-being, resilience, you used the word happiness. So when people find, and I put the word harmonious in front of the word passion, because some people can be very passionate about something and it's not particularly harmonious and actually is detrimental to their well-being.
Interesting.
When they're upset, which is what we call obsessive passion. Right, so you're completely obsessed with
Take
something.
it too far.
Too far. A friend of mine, Dan Lerner, who is a positive psychologist and teaches on this kind of stuff, but you know, will say, you know, if you are that competitive around your passion, you're that obsessed with it, that it's either win or nothing.
Yeah.
You know, you're that obsessed.
Yeah, it's crushing.
There are many people
in
the press at the moment that we could say, obsessive
there's a different cost
kind
to
of
that.
passion.
Yeah.
Whereas the sense I get from you is that harmonious passion. So when did you realize that this was your passion versus anything else? Was a moments that led you towards it? Like, when did you go, God, this is a passion? Because when you said, even during the pandemic, I thought, how can I help others? You found within what you do that, right? You didn't have to go find something else to do, right? You didn't go put on a white jacket.
I've been finding it right here for 18 years.
So
I think, you know, that's a great question. If I think back, it's a lot of it has to do with my appreciation for nature and the impact of being outside and connecting with other organisms. I could never work in a cubicle. You know, I could never work in an office park. And that's been true for all the jobs I've had. I've had a number of interesting jobs well before I got into agriculture, but a common thread is being outside. I taught snowboarding in northern Vermont for a while. Why? Because you're outside every day.
Yeah.
And if no guests show up for lessons, well, then you're just snowboarding. You don't get a paycheck, but you're having fun. And then I'd go home, and in the afternoon, just before the sun would set, I'd cut wood for our wood stove, which was our only heat. Why? Because it comes from a plant. It's a natural way to heat the home, and it keeps me connected with nature. And I think nature's always been grounding for me. Yeah. And so nature and travel, and I was a travel agent for a while. After biology took me traveling, I went to places like Costa Rica, all the way to Antarctica, doing research down there. Then I became a travel agent. All of these have some exploring, some adventure, but outside time, I guess, would be a common thread. And then for me, I guess the newer part of my passion really is the human side. I think I've had it, but it took me a long time to recognize it, right? Like early on, I was chasing plants. I don't know that I was obsessive passionate to the point of the extreme, but I certainly was going down that path, right? Where the end product was a paper in a journal that you has to get a certain number of citations so that you could get to the professorship to become a tenured, and I was just like, I do not want to go that way. Why? Because it just seemed very narrow, and it seemed to be missing the human element. So I guess for me, the awakening was, I was in a program that would have led to a PhD, and I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, studying pine trees, pinyon pine trees and moths in a very interesting community around what is actually a recent lava flow. So very rocky soils, interesting ecology. Anyhow, it was there that I realized I need to stop. I can't go down that path of PhD, professor, committee meetings, grant writing. It just seemed narrow, and it seemed lacking in the human side of it. And I looked at my hobbies, and my hobbies were making beer and wine at home, gardening, keeping bees for honey, making mead. All of those have biology, they have plants, they have nature. They also have something tangible that I could share with my friends and family. And that warmth, that humanity allowed me to open up that other side of my brain. So it was like, ta-da, right brain and left brain, right?
Yeah.
Like that for me is that passion, is to have it both ways, my head and my heart. I think is really why I've been happy. In this business, I mean, think about it. People have been making wine for thousands of years. This is rich. There's romance, there's business. Poetry, there's social, it's the humanities.
Yeah.
But there's almost science too.
Yeah.
Like, and there's business too. Like it's not missing anything. It's got technology, it's got ancient history. Like it's got a lot of layers. I think it'll keep me interested for a lot longer.
Yeah. I'm starting to doubt whether you are obsessive passionate.
I know. Now. I get fired up.
No, it's great. It's absolutely fantastic. So let's go back to one of the other values of learning. And I mentioned this to you earlier as we were stood in the parking lot. Having done a few of these now, when I've asked a question about learning, some of the CEOs that I've spoken to have struggled to answer the question. And the question goes something like, we talk about transformative learning. So, and typically that happens when something happens to you that we call disorientating dilemma, which is basically something that happens to you for the first time. So you have no shortcuts. Your brain can't go, oh, this is similar to that. And when we did that last time, we did this, so I'm going to do something similar this time. And I have that track of, I know how to deal with that because I've dealt with something similar before. Right? Truly transformative learning happens when those disorientating dilemmas are, we've never experienced this before. So give me something that you had never experienced before that you had to lead the organization through and out of, and what did you learn on that journey?
Yeah, I've got a couple examples come to mind. Yeah, I think the first one's kind of a fun one because it really connects to sustainability and to my background in ecology, which is in my early time at Trefethen as a viticulturist, I was really hell-bent on increasing biodiversity in the vineyard. And so maybe this was passion too far, to the point that one of the very old school farmers that I know here in the valley well was driving by our vineyard. And our vineyard's down there on the valley floor. A lot of people can see it.
It's right there.
Yeah, it is. It's right behind us. The sun's kind of shining on it.
Yeah, it's looking great.
I ran into him at an educational event, and he said, "John, how's it going?" I said, "It's good." He's like, your vineyard looks like a wildlife preserve. And I'm like, awesome. Isn't that fantastic? Only he didn't mean it like a compliment.
Right.
Because I'll tell you why I could come back to that later. Because what's interesting, another interesting thread would be that, I'll tell you the story. We planted cover crop, and cover crop is the plants that we plant in between the grapevines, in the middle of the rows, and we can plant different recipes of cover crops for different goals for each vineyard block. So in some cases, we'll plant something really nutritious to enrich the soil. In some cases, we'll actually plant something to compete with the vine, to slow it down if it's growing too fast. It's a way we can naturally dial in the balance of the vine, reducing the amount of work that it needs and increasing the quality. We can also attract beneficial insects if we plant flowers. And so there was a particular block where I kind of went nuts with the cover crop, and it was just growing crazy, and not just in the middles, but also underneath the vines. And I thought, this looks amazing. And he called it a wildlife preserve, and I'm like, I'm just killing it. And we'll get grapes at harvest, right? And I started to see some grapevines die. And I thought, well, this is strange. And I remembered some of my teaching or my learning at UC Davis, where I went to school in grapes and wine. And one of the things as I was graduating with a master's there, my major professor said, "You guys will be fine. It's really hard to kill a grapevine."
Oh.
And there I am going, vines dying. So, we get out in the vineyard to try to figure out what's going on. And lo and behold, it's a vole, like a field mouse.
Right.
And they were just nibbling, and they were nibbling on the bark and then the phloem, which is just underneath the bark, and they'd go just around the base of a grapevine, eating that nutritious tissue for lunch, but they've just killed the vascular tissue, and then the vine would die. And the reason the voles were exploding was because the predators couldn't get to them. And so in my wildlife preserve, I'd inadvertently kicked it out of balance, too far to the grass and the flowers and the voles. And there are natural predators like coyotes, but especially owls and hawks, but they can't see through the grass. So there was tunnels underground, whole vole villages, and they were just eating all sorts of things, roots and seeds and occasional bites of grapevines.
Yeah.
So we had to adapt. And that was one where, again, I was like, wow, this is surprising, this is catastrophic. And there was forever a hole in the middle of that vineyard where there were where the worst impact was, but we learned from it, and we've become better at managing our cover crop in what we call the vineyard floor. We don't use any chemical herbicides whatsoever, but we have a number of tools that we use right underneath the vines to create visibility there, so that the predators can get it, and then I can grow the cover crop much taller in the middles between the vines.
Amazing. Yeah, it's that's you zooming in and zooming out again. It's just like, okay, what's going on here at this vine, all the way back out to, okay, how's this going to impact the whole business?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the earthquake.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the other one. Ooh, man. I mean, and honestly, the pandemic was a big deal.
Yeah.
The wildfires, they've been a big deal, but the earthquake, that was something else.
This is burnt here as well. I see this tree here. It's got burn damage.
Yeah, that could have been a lightning strike.
Well. Yeah.
We are up here at the top of this hill. So the earthquake was 5:25 in the morning on August 24th, actually 3:25 in the morning, August 24th, 2014. It was a 6.0 earthquake south of Napa, about 8 miles south of our winery, but the fault line came within a half mile of our property. The building that you can kind of see in the background is a beautiful 3-story wooden winery built in 1886. And that winery had been through a lot, but this really tested it. So where do I start? It was quite a shaker. It lasted for about 15 seconds. It was not one jolt, it was a roller. And when we got to the winery and evaluated the damage just as the sun was coming up, it was bad. I mean, I walked into my office, and my office was on an upper, maybe third floor of another building. It looked in my office like someone had ransacked it. It wasn't like, oh, things fell off the bookshelf. It looked like someone went in there, did this, and like stuff was broken, papers were everywhere. I was like, wow. And that historic building, that winery, is the heart and soul of our operation. It's a historic landmark. It's been there, like I said, since 1886. The upper stories were shifted 4 feet to the west. All of the posts were cracked. It looked like it was going to fall over. We happened to have some contractors on site already to do some work on our catwalks. They were like, hey, should we just park the front end loader over there and try to hold it up? I'm like, sure, whatever we can do.
Whatever you can do.
Yeah. So, we caught our breath, but it was so challenging. In terms of our business interruption, it was the second day of harvest. We had just started picking grapes there in late August, and we do everything ourselves right there on our property. The winemaking equipment, it was also in disarray. The impacts, I'll try to keep it short, but our tasting room was closed immediately. Our historic winery was red tagged. We didn't know if or how we could fix it. We had grapes that were ready to come in. We had no ability to crush or make wine. We had a lot of cleaning up to do, and a lot of uncertainty, and we had the press knocking on our door. We had helicopters flying around us.
Safety issues.
Power would come on and
people.
off, tremendous safety issues. Yeah, and the one thing that amazed me is that there we are on Sunday morning. Certainly I heard from some of our tasting room team who often work on Sunday. I also heard from a number of people that don't work that day, and so did the Trefethens. These were employees who were calling in saying, hey, can I help? How's the winery? And I'm like, how are you? How's your family? And they're like, oh, we're fine. Can I come in and clean up? And the engagement that we saw from the first hour and for the days, weeks, and months that went on was amazing. It's easy for me to say we didn't have a single employee quit or leave during that time. It was a time of greatest uncertainty for our company in our entire history. And everybody leaned in. They literally picked up a broom. I took all of our hospitality staff who didn't have guests for at least a month and said, you know what, you can help us in other ways, and give them different jobs around the property to help us during that time. I gathered with the family to see how committed they were to repairing the historic building, and they were committed, and we figured it out. And Haley Trefethen managed that project. It took a few years to repair it. But the biggest learning there was culture. We thought we had a good culture, and it was something that we'd worked on over time. But this was the first time, I think, that we really saw the benefits.
Yeah.
The idea it got tested. And it got tested, and it proved how engaged everyone was. And then having, when you go through it in YPO, we talk about shared experience, right? When you share an experience with someone, when you share an earthquake with someone, you're bonded for life. And so the employees that were there as of August 24th, 2014, were bonded forever. The employees that did grab a broom will remember it forever. And then our culture just built on that, right? And so we came out of that earthquake. I'd never wish for an earthquake or a pandemic or wildfires, right? Or a plague of insects or voles for that matter. But in every one of them, we've come out not just okay and not just glad about how we went in, we've come out better than ever. I mean, it has really been invigorating for us. each of these challenges, and especially the earthquake, we came out of that stronger than ever. Clarity around culture and vision, engaged workforce, and just doubling down on our commitment on the family's commitment to the company and to our future, which just builds confidence in the employees, which builds confidence in our guests. When they say these people are in it for life, they're in it for multiple generations, and an earthquake isn't going to stop them. That's a pretty compelling story.
Yeah.
And when people visit the winery today, and we still have pictures of the earthquake damage, and they can see the seismic retrofit. The new joke is if there's an earthquake, we're going to run into the building because it's probably the safest place around.
Building. Yeah, those big steel girders look
pretty strong.
Pretty strong.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's it's brilliant, and it takes and that's why people talk about the pandemic as well. You'll see organizations, cultures serving them very well, or other places that just kind of fall apart.
Talk about a stress test.
And
it was really
I'd
a
say
test.
50% of our work right now as a firm is around culture change, culture transformation. The other 50% is leadership.
Right.
Pre-pandemic,
nobody's talking about it.
Nobody's talking about it at all.
Because it sounded frou-frou. Well, that's nice.
Well, and your business, very different, because people kind of have to come to work because the grapes are here, right? They're not at home on a computer, right? So versus a lot of other organizations.
For a remote first company is very tough.
Very tough. And that was what people were figuring out. It's like, we don't know what the culture is anymore because it used to be about being here, and we felt like we could control it or at least manage it or lead it, when we're working together. But when we're not, it seems to have slipped through our fingers. And that's what a lot of organizations are struggling with right now. Is what is the new culture? And like you said, how long does it take to build that culture that you need? And it's years.
And I think I've been so in my life grounded in physical reality. I find the metaverse concept a little frightening, not that interesting. I like nature. I want real food. I don't think I could actually eat a croissant in Paris in the metaverse. I'll just pretend I am, right? But to be physically grounded here in the Napa Valley, that emotional connection, you felt it when you drove up our driveway this morning.
I stopped. I told you, I stopped as I was driving up. I was like, I got to film this, and just carried on driving with my camera. I didn't get arrested, which was good, but I was filming and driving at the same time.
And I think that's where our company and that's where our culture starts, is in the soil in our vineyard, with the earth and that connection. And our guests, our consumers can feel that too.
Well, before I ask you to crack that bottle of wine open that's behind you, I want to just touch on climate change.
Okay.
It's a massive topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think about it, and how do you lead an organization to do what you can do within your 850 acres?
We have about 440 vineyard acres and closer to 700 if we talk about gross acres.
Okay, 700 acres. What's your part in sustainability, climate change, etc.?
Oh, it's great.
How do you think about that?
So with climate change specifically, I guess there's one way to slice it into two perspectives is what can we do to minimize our contribution to it, and then the other is what can we do to mitigate its impact on us. And so I'll start with the first, which obviously has us thinking about greenhouse gases and how can we work in the soil to increase sequestration because plants all take in carbon. It's again part of their ability to use solar energy to take carbon out of the atmosphere. As we plant, say, really vigorous cover crops and allow them to decompose into the soil, we're building the organic matter in the soil, we're enriching the soil, we're sinking carbon into the soil. It doesn't have an infinite capacity, because the more carbon you put in the soil, the more you're also going to be breaking down and respiring. And so you're chasing your tail a little bit. But certainly there are practices you can do to increase how much carbon you're sinking in your soil. That's a big one. And we really think about the carbon cycle and the concept of the grapes to the wine and to the fermentation as well. So quite recently, let me back up and explain what I mean by the carbon cycle. So I've said that plants capture energy from the sun. They take CO2 out of the atmosphere, they store it in the form of carbohydrates. Some of those carbohydrates go into building the vine that just stays there as a woody material, and that's growing, and the carbon is staying there for years. Some of the carbon is in the form of sugar. Those carbohydrates are sugars, they're in the grapes. Sugar is actually the substrate for fermentation, alcoholic fermentation, turning sugar into alcohol, and some CO2 is released. And so when we take the grapes just to our winery right there in the vineyard and we're fermenting them, CO2 is released. And we realized, this is not fossil fuel emissions, but it's all CO2.
Yeah.
Maybe we could catch it. And so we started working with a small company out of Austin, Texas, just a couple of years ago, a pilot project. This was actually at the suggestion of the enologist on our team. Another way that we just want to really embrace that learning and innovation value internally. He brought this idea to the table and we're like, let's do it. He had found this company, we partnered with them. And so we did a pilot project of catching CO2 on the top of our fermentation tanks. And then we're selling that into the industrial market to help replace other sources of CO2. So that's one way. Another, in terms of reducing our impact on climate change, would be to try to decarbonize our operation, to try to electrify much of our equipment. And so we have electric forklifts, we have electric like four-wheelers and mules, utility vehicles. We have electric cars. We're on a wait list for electric truck, the F-150 Lightning. We're excited about that. And we're just getting delivery of electric tractors. So we have replaced our garden tractor with a fully electric model. And within this month, we're expecting delivery of 2 vineyard tractors from a new company that has fully electric, really sort of Internet of Things, fancy tractors that we're really excited about. Trying to think of other examples, there surely are more, but that's part of us in sort of minimizing our emissions.
And where do those ideas and innovations come from? You mentioned the capturing of the CO2 came from a member of staff. Is it, how do people...
Yeah, people.
How do you keep people thinking about
I'll tell you,
this?
like we have the culture of learning and innovation within our company, but we also have it as a community. When I came to Napa Valley, I underestimated the importance of the people in this industry. The marketing materials will tell you that Napa Valley has amazing terroir, and by that they mean the geology and the soils, the climate and the weather. The perfect wine grapes. Yeah, but you need people to achieve that. And people like the Trefethens, people like the Mondavi family, people like Justin Myers, who started Silver Oak, Warren Winiarski started Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. These people starting in the 60s and 70s approached it, and Robert Mondavi deserves a lot of credit for this. The classic rising tide lifts all boats. You know, this is an industry where years ago, if your press broke or your tractor broke, you could borrow your neighbor's. That was years ago. It's also today. You know, I have friends who work in Silicon Valley, and I would go down to their company and meet them for lunch, and I have to sign an NDA to go to the cafeteria. Like, what am I going to steal? And it's the opposite here in Napa Valley. I can be like, hey, your Chardonnay is amazing. And they'll be like, yeah, come on over. I'll show you how I made it. Like, we really are working
learning
together.
from each other with
and
each
so
other.
Years ago, I was president of Napa Valley Grape Growers, and it's an organization that we're still very active in. Jon Trefethen was actually one of the founders. This is an organization dedicated to preserving and protecting the agriculture of Napa Valley, and education is one of their core efforts. And so we have seminars that are attracting, you know, your vineyard managers, your winemakers, and your vineyard workers, and all different layers of the organization to come in and talk about sustainability. In fact, just this last year, they've been doing a series with a professor at UC Berkeley who's been giving some really compelling talks to help us think about sustainability, really challenging some of our assumptions. And so it's a commitment of an individual, of a family of employees, but really of an entire community. Yeah. And it's because of this long-term view. I think it's easier here, right? It's palatable because people care about this special place and they want to preserve it.
Yeah, it's the physical. It's the physical place. I mean, you mentioned it earlier again when we were talking on the way up about, you know, Napa has a brand as well. It's not just the individual wines and families within the area. The area has its own brand,
and it has to have an integrity in that brand, which is the quality in the bottle and the preservation of our ability to keep making this year after year, decade after decade. Yeah, and then so that is a bit about on the emission side. The other is thinking about impacts of climate change on us. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to actually be out here practicing ecology, to not just eat food, but to grow food, to be working as a farmer, an organization that does farming, is a recognition of how humbling it is. Like, it's a tremendously risky business. There's a lot we can't control, like the weather, like invasive pests, and that's even before climate change. So certainly the climate's getting more dynamic, but we could never control the weather. And you know, we have weather records on our property going back to 1968. I can tell you what our average rainfall is. I can also tell you there hasn't been a year when we had our average rainfall. Every year is either wetter or drier, maybe a lot wetter, maybe a lot drier. Same with temperatures. I could tell you the average temperature in the afternoon on a February, but I can't tell you when we had an average February, right? So it's as though Mother Nature has all the cards. She shuffles them during the winter, and then the growing season begins and she deals out one card at a time. We have to play the hand we're dealt. So we've always been bouncing around warm, cool, hot, dry. Are we going to bounce around a little bit more? Sure. But we have a lot of tools, a lot of things we can do when we design a vineyard to build in resiliency, like allowing the leaves to splay out a bit more than we used to so that they have a bit more shade when there's 110-degree heat spell in August. So using leaves for natural shade is just one of the improvements we've made in our trellis systems. within the growing season, we can do things like change our irrigation, change the amount of leaves we pull based on the block, based on the direction of the rows, based on the path of the sun, and on the vintage at hand. So really trying to ride the wave, if you will, up and down, the dynamics of climate, and recognizing that we're going to have droughts. We're in a drought right now, so we're very smart about how we conserve water. We're going to have increased heat spells. So as I said, we can shade the vines naturally with leaves. But there's also something that makes me think we'll still be growing grapes here for a while. And I say that because you can see some sensational headlines, right? Someone plugged in a climate change model to a map of California and said, Napa Valley is going to have to move. Well, that was a pretty bold statement. Yeah. And what they were doing is making an assumption based on average temperatures and the change in average temperature and how we grow grapes now. What they forgot was the human element and our ability to adapt. Yeah. And what they missed was what is known as the coastal anomaly here in Northern California. And it's really unique to the Bay Area, to San Francisco, as a kind of gateway from the Pacific Ocean, which is that much of the inland areas of California are trapped by mountains. And I say trapped because we're sitting here on the edge of the Mayacama Mountains, and it's west. The ocean is over another range of mountains, the coastal range out there. In this direction, it's the Napa Valley proper right behind us, and then it's the Vaca Range. Two mountain ranges, and you can see the valley right behind us. When hot air rises on the valley floor, it goes up. It has to be replaced from somewhere. The only place the air can come from is to the south, over the San Pablo Bay, which connects to San Francisco Bay, which connects to the ocean. And the ocean off the coast of California is quite cool, like 55 degrees on average in the summer, quite cool. And so it'd be 100 degrees in St. Helena. That hot air rises, but cool air that's been chilling over the ocean comes right through the Golden Gate Bridge. It's always windy on the Golden Gate, across the bay, up the valley, and it's our natural air conditioning. It turns on every afternoon in the summer.
And I can feel it now, even though it's not the summer.
I know, right?
You can feel the cool breeze. The cool breeze.
And so that sub is going to mitigate. There are parts of California that are going to get quite warm, but we have tools in those areas. And particularly where we are in the Oak Knoll district, the southern end of Napa Valley, we're seeing that the air conditioning is not broken. There's a consistent breeze that really keeps us cooler, which is great.
But you are also, and this is something we talk about a lot with leaders, is you're also still noticing what's going on around you. You're not like, we don't have to worry about it, let's forget about it. You can tell me the average temperature on a February the 3rd in the afternoon because you're tracking that data, right?
So absolutely.
And you said something, we build resiliency, and we have people who are adaptable. So what you're actually recognizing is, hey, it's not as bad as it probably is in other places. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to think about it. Actually, I'm going to take in all the data all the time and constantly think about this and constantly tweak and adapt and build resiliency and be prepared.
If we say that nature was already variable and climate change has made it more variable, that's mind-boggling. And we still want to make great wine? Well, we just need to increase our tools, our knowledge, and keep learning, right? And so every year, what can we learn from the year behind us? What worked, what didn't work? It's like a living laboratory down there.
And it's exactly the same for my financial services clients who are dealing with massive volatility right now in the markets.
Yeah, that's right.
My crypto clients who have gone from hero to zero in a very short period of time. It's like, okay, how do we adapt? How do we notice, and what are the signals that we're reading? And how do we behave differently and tweak and build resiliency into our businesses?
That's a great analogy, right?
Exactly the same.
People say like the average return in the S&P 500. Yeah, but when did it ever deliver the average?
Exactly.
It's always going to be up and
what
down.
was it yesterday?
And what strategies do you have as you ride the waves up and down?
And then you come back to building resiliency within your people, noticing, being in your environment, zooming in, zooming out, all of the things that you've talked about in nature, in wine. You could draw exact parallels across.
And I don't know if I'd say for crypto, but definitely in regular equities, I'd say hold on, right? Hold on for the long run. Like you want to be resilient because you still want to be there at the end.
My crypto guys will say hang on.
Exactly.
But they're in it.
Exactly.
I don't know whether that's out.
What else could they say?
Or not. Exactly.
Can't get out now.
But no, that's brilliant. So, tangential. I'm getting a little thirsty. I can feel it.
Yeah, we should have some wine.
But what's your favorite wine?
Oh, yeah. Well, which is your favorite child? That's a tough question.
I know. It's easy. I've got 4 I could tell you instantly. No, I'm kidding. Kids? You didn't hear? You don't watch that.
Yeah. I think for me, it depends on the occasion. Yeah.
Okay.
We make a dry Riesling, and that's a fantastic wine to start out the afternoon. Or to start out the evening, I should say. You don't know what you're going to cook. Take it out of the fridge, have a glass, think about it, because it's a great food wine, a great opening up the palate, but it doesn't go with every dish. Right. When it comes to red wine, I love Cabernet. I mean, Cabernet is just an amazing variety, and what's interesting is that it treads the line between fruity and vegetal. And so when I talk about authenticity and our respect for the varieties, I made a reference to some other wines where the grapes are on the vine quite long, or maybe the growing region is quite warm. At some point, to my palate, all red grapes end up tasting the same. If you let them get overripe, they're just really fruity.
Yeah.
But if you can grow Cabernet so it gets ripe without getting overripe, it has a freshness from the acidity, it has some body from the tannin, and the complexity of the flavors is that mix of dark fruits, red fruits, but then also a slight herbaceousness. And as we were walking up here, I see some madrones here. I do see some bay.
There's some bay
there's some
behind
oak here, yeah. So you could smell the bay leaf, and you'll get a bit of that in the wine I'm going to open up right now. And so it's this little bit of a green note to go with the fruit. Not so much green, not bell pepper. That'd be the extreme.
Yeah.
But it's somewhere in between. Should we try it?
This is a route to the top first.
Oh, really?
This is the only climb we've done where we've had alcohol.
Well,
on the top of the mountain.
We've got to change that.
So yeah, let's do it.
So this is our 2016 Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. And the reason I chose this bottle is perfect for where we're sitting right now, because where we are is on top of a hill above our Hill Spring Vineyard, which is our one other vineyard besides our main ranch, which you can see down behind us. This is the one wine that straddles two vineyards. So It is a Cabernet that includes grapes from up here at Hill Spring, as well as grapes from the main ranch.
Got it. All right.
And it is a 2016 vintage.
Excellent. If I don't like it, you're going to be in big trouble.
Uh-oh. I'm still going to have to hike down with you. There you go, hold that.
Oh, awesome. Look at this, wine on the top of a hill.
Doesn't get any better.
Oh, smells good. I got to look like I know what I'm doing.
Do it. Sniff it. Tell me what you smell.
You have to tell me. I'm the least of the wine connoisseurs. My friends will all be laughing at this because they're like, he knows nothing about wine. He drinks light beer and tequila. So
those are all good too.
What do I smell?
You were talking about how smell. We were talking about how smell brings back memories.
Yes.
Yeah. Is this evoking anything for you?
Good steak.
Right. A good meal.
That's usually when I drink a thick red wine. Right. I'm going to give this a try. Oh, that is good. Not too heavy. Like you said earlier, it's not that really thick.
That's the freshness. And that comes from natural acidity, like the chemistry, which comes from the grapes. It's a natural acidity in the grapes that's preserved when Cabernet is grown in a cooler environment, like we are here in the Oak Knoll district. Cheers.
Cheers. This is great. Oh, rehydrate before we hike back down.
Yeah, exactly.
So I got one. I'm gonna close this out. I'm gonna finish with one thing, and that is really to think about my audience for Route to the Top. The audience is pretty much split 50-50. Half of the people that listen to it and watch it are CEOs, senior leaders within organizations, and half of the people that watch it are from within HR who are responsible for developing leaders within organizations. And that's a lot of who my clients are, because we're building leadership development programs for Carrier or for Quaker Houghton or whatever those organizations may be. So that's how my audience bifurcates. But both are interested in clearly in leadership, because one is helping develop it within organizations and one is doing it within organizations. So we talked about the values and we talked about the culture. We talked about people, plants, planet. When you think about leadership and your own leadership within the organization, how would you sum that up for my audience? So thinking about their own leadership, what do you think about? Clearly, people is a very strong one for you. That's kind of oozing out the importance of that. You talked to me earlier about you were thinking about a career change at one point and becoming a coach because the people side of things became so important from you, and then you kind of learned about that. You're like, no, actually, I'm just going to practice coaching here. So what are those tenets of your leadership?
I guess for me, it's interesting because, one of the things about wine is that you can project or describe the taste scientifically, but you can also recognize that it tastes different based on the context, right? And if you're enjoying a great meal and you're with some fantastic people and you're having a great conversation, the wine's going to taste amazing. Similarly, if you're in the beautiful Napa Valley. And so when I think about the workplace and I think about leadership within it, what I'm trying to do is to create the context and down to the specific role and position for an individual to thrive. And it's not going to be the same for every person, not going to be the same for every department because of the different functions, different kinds of work. But even within a department, people are different, right? So recognizing that we all have different personalities, different needs, but trying to identify within my direct reports and then allow them to work with their team similarly, what makes someone excited? You know, I need someone who wants to keep pruning vines. I have a team in the vineyard that has incredible engagement, incredible tenure. I was sitting with Moises the other day. He's been with us for 40 years. For a while, he drove tractor. Now he's back to pruning vines, working in the field. He loves it. He does great work. But I also need crew leaders. I also need a vineyard foreman. And so it's identifying within each of them, is this someone who wants to grow within the company? Let's make sure we provide that opportunity. Is this someone who really needs their weekends off because they have certain needs at home? Let's figure that out. And so how do we really provide supportive leadership, supportive management is part of it. And then I think as far as skills go, what I've come to really recognize, both in terms of what I bring and what I'm looking for in good leaders, communication. So much can fall apart if there's misunderstandings or if people don't feel included and supported. And even if you intend for those things to happen, if you're not communicating clearly, they're not hearing you. Yeah. And so I really focus a lot in my one-to-one meetings on making sure I'm actively listening. I'm not just waiting to speak. I'm saying, okay, this is what this person is really feeling. This is what they're really sensing at home. And this is where I see their energy really pick up. Let's try to take some of the work that they don't like, give it to someone else who likes that part. Let's give them more that they like. And let's end this meeting in a way that no matter what the meeting is about, even if I need to give them some corrective feedback, I always want to end the meeting with someone feeling clarity and happiness when they walk out the door. I want them to feel like Jon supports me, Jon has my back, and I know what's expected of me, and I'm gonna go get them. Yeah. And if I succeed in that, then they're successful in where they go. And I really, you mentioned HR, and that's a function that we've developed during my time here in 18 years, and we focus so much on recruitment, deliberately on recruiting people who will be additive to our culture, who will thrive, and who are coming in with positive energy and enthusiasm. Because when you're surrounded by that, the wine tastes better, right? And when the wine tastes better, when the employees, it's like you walked into the tasting room. Yeah. People are smiling. All of a sudden, you're having a better time. Yeah. And that's key.
Well, having clarity around your culture, and not just knowing what it is, but it permeating everything that happens.
Yes, it's huge.
Makes it really easy for an organization to recruit.
Yeah.
Because you know what you're looking for, and people feel it and will know whether they fit or whether they don't fit because their culture's so strong.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that you mentioned as part of your setup, you used the word context. Mm-hmm. That's a huge skill capability of any leader, is how well plugged into the context am I? How do I recognize the context that I'm in and how that's changing? So, whether that's for an individual, whether it's for the whole organization, whether it's for the farmers, the environment, whatever it might be, is am I contextually connected to what I'm doing here?
It's like the values remain the same and the manifestation changes based on context, based on the weather, based on the year, based on the vintage, based on a pandemic.
Yeah. But you have to own and lead through and with that context.
And understand it.
You can't ignore it, otherwise
absolutely.
it'll just happen to you.
Yeah.
And that's when things start to fall apart.
Yeah,
really interesting. Fantastic.
This has been great.
Awesome. Well, no, you've been great. I mean, thanks for reaching out and getting this going. I really appreciate it.
All right, cheers again.
Thanks, Jon. We're done. Thanks, everybody.